Hello and welcome everyone to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. I am your host, Nina Joshi. Have a couple of quick announcements before we bring on our guest for today. The first is that our Versailles Challenge is live. There's a call for application specifically focusing on menopause with $50,000 total cash when it comes to prize value. It's going to be a really exciting opportunity. We also have our October symposium coming up at the end of this month. It's going to be our last symposium of the year, so make sure that you join us for that event. And lastly, we have our summit coming up in the beginning of December. Going to be a great way to kind of wrap up the year as well, so make sure that you start grabbing your tickets for those. And with that, we'd like to formally announce our guest for today, Anne DeGheest, who is the founder and managing director of Healthtech Capital. Thank you so much for being here today, Anne.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Here we are. I'm popping up.
Welcome. Well, I'm so glad that you're able to join and tell us a little bit more about yourself and the amazing work that you're doing. But maybe, Anne, a great place to start is if you could tell our audience a little bit more about yourself, your background, and really what has kind of led you to being the founder and managing director of Healthtech Capital.
Yeah, how many hours do we have? I don't know. Okay, I'll do the.
Give us the highlights.
Okay, I'll give the highlight. Yeah. So people were asking, my accent is a little bit of a French twist. I'm originally from Belgium, and I a master in engineering there and an MBA from Harvard, and then I discovered you all spoke English, so I learned English. At least I'm still working on it. So I've been a serial entrepreneur for really 20 years, and I coined the word health tech in 1986. So I think like a grandmother watching the market right now. And that was because my first company when I finished business school was a company called Raychem, and I was the first woman in sales. So they put me in an area called the computer industry there that was just starting, and I learned how to sell new products. Then I went to a company called Nelcor, and we launched pulse oximetry worldwide, which I hope all of you have one at home after COVID. And I combined these two experiences in creating this new space I define as health tech. So traditionally, life sciences, medical devices, and biotech, which is high product risk going after an existing market. And the way they invest in company, the way you build a company is very different. Health tech is all about market risk. You take existing technology from the computer and telecom industry, and then you apply it to a problem in healthcare where the endpoint is cost savings and efficiency. When traditional med tech, it's clinical outcomes. So for 20 or 30 years, I was this lone ranger. I was this crazy Belgian. And then, at that 8 IPO, so people say, well, maybe she's crazy. Maybe there's something here after all. And then in January 2011 at JP Morgan, in the big ballroom there were 2,500 people from Wall Street. And then John Doerr and Eric Schmidt said, this is it. We have this new space and we're going to call it digital health, and we're going to fix diabetes with an app, which I think we're still working on that. But and so then the market went crazy the other way. And so in 2010, because it was so difficult to get fundraising for these companies I was mentoring, and I usually got involved when there was 2 or 3 people, so really early. I started a group called Healthtech Capital. And Healthtech Capital was maverick like me who wanted to change healthcare delivery. And they were coming from the healthcare industry. There were physicians, there were people that had run medical device companies, they were coming from the tech side, and also from the consumer engagement side, because that's always been the holy grail of healthcare. How do you get people to change behavior? And that's how we started, and I'll spend more time on that if you want. So Healthtech is like a membership organization of accredited investor VCs and corporate VCs with people like Merck and so we invest seed Series A stage. We're agnostics. And we've invested in over 60 companies over the last 10, 15 years, so we're pretty active there. I personally have had 8 unicorns, so statistically it's impossible. So I'll talk more about this. There's a common link here somewhere. Anyway, so that's kind of my 100 miles an hour. Oh, I'm also an artist in my spare time.
Incredible.
If you go to adegeheest.com, which is my first initial there, you can look at my digital art, and I get them printed on aluminum.
That's wow. Jack of all trades over here.
Yeah. Left brain, right brain, trying to manage.
That's right. That's very important. I mean, how incredible. And I really like, Anne, that you defined kind of health tech, because you really got to see kind of it as at its inception and how it's probably evolved like crazy over time. That must be so interesting to observe.
Well, I mean, I was talking to the big LPs, and not to say there's this new category there I'm going to call a health tech. And I say, we don't understand. We have medtech, we have biotech, and healthcare IT. It's none of that. It's something different. And they could deal with that, you know.
Yeah.
And then the traditional life science VCs, they had a whole bunch of MD, PhD looking into IP and mechanisms of action. And I said, I'm just using software. We have no IP, and we don't change the workflow. We're going to create a market that doesn't exist. But trust me, it's there and it's big. You can see it with very short conversations.
100%. That's incredible. And I'm so curious. And I mean, I definitely want to learn and dive into what you're doing with Healthtech Capital. But even before then, I could only imagine just the wealth of experience that you've had and how you've probably been able to take all of that with you to all of the work that you're doing right now. How has your previous experience and, working in all of these different industries influenced your approach to investing, to mentoring kind of within early stage health tech companies? Is there like a framework in mind that you've developed over the years?
Yeah, I mean, what I learned is a couple of things that are really essential to success. One is that spend more time on the problem from the viewpoint of all the stakeholders. And then the big challenge in healthcare, there's multiple stakeholders with conflict of interest. And so a lot of the people technically fall in love with the technology that they came up with, and they just try to tell people they need it. And that doesn't really work very well. So you have people buy solution to a problem, they don't buy technology. So typically, if you spend more time from the viewpoint of the nurse, the pharmacist, the physicians, the patients, all the different players there, about what is in it for them to change behavior and use your technology, that's when you can define big businesses there. The second thing is, being a startup, all my unicorns are near-death experience, all of them. And so you need a flexible mindset where you need to have the ability of making decisions with 20% of the facts, move on and learn more and adjust and correct, as opposed to analyze things to death and then the market passes you. Or then you blame somebody because they got it wrong, whatever that is. And so not everybody has that capability because it's thriving in chaos, which not everybody like that. A lot of people like structure there. So I will say that if you have those two, these are the key components, have the flexible mindset to go for the roller coaster and enjoy it. And then continuously ask yourself, if I define the problem from the viewpoint of each of the person there, and what do I do for them? So when you position the product there, you're not selling the features, you're selling the benefits. If that makes sense.
I totally know what you mean. I like that. That's a really good framework, I think, to kind of look through all of it. So that was very helpful for any of the founders on the call as well. I wanted to ask you a little bit more, Anne, about what you're doing with Healthtech Capital. I think kind of the first component that you mentioned really is kind of the membership aspect, the kind of mentorship that you provide. How are you approaching, mentorship more broadly? What does that kind of look like for you?
Yeah, well, I have two companies. I have MedStars, which is my advisory. This is where I usually engage with one company very deep and, kind of be a fractional executive there, depending what their needs are, usually also on the business architecture side. And at Healthtech, we want to give feedback. I mean, for example, when people, we go for a platform called DLM where people can submit. And then we pick typically 4 companies out of 40 every month. And then we get feedback if they present to us, because my experience is half the time people don't know how to communicate what they're developing. I mean, it's quite common there. It's not a bad thing. It's just they're still learning how to do that. And so we give them feedback after the screening. Is that these are our raw notes. Don't get offended. And this is how we heard you. This is what the concerns we had. And right now we may not be interested, but just be aware that's how you came across, which has been very helpful to a lot of people, because when you pitch to a VC, they don't return your phone call. You don't know if they're in Hawaii playing golf or they hate your guts. It's kind of, there's no, there's a dark hole there. So we decide we give you feedback. And then if you go into the due diligence, then we do a deeper dive. And then we share some of the risk analysis we do afterwards. So again, it's a learning experience there. If we do invest, then we're pretty active. We could be a board observer. We could we want to participate with the CEO. We want to be helpful. Very often, it's a very long journey of ups and downs. We try to lift you up when you're down, and we try to bring you back down when you're too up.
I love that. Right sizing, finding the equilibrium. I love that. Can you tell us a little bit more about the process? So for anyone right now that is interested in Healthtech Capital or being submitted, what does that process typically look like for companies?
Yeah, so if you go to the healthtechcapital.com website there's a big blue button everywhere. It's the first IQ test everybody passes. It says submission. And then if you click on that, you basically go into a platform called DLM. A lot of the large angel groups are using that. It allows you to have your own template of your information there. and then you can submit to multiple angel groups. So it makes the life of the
Oh,
entrepreneur much easier, and also help us on our side to syndicate much more effectively between angel
right.
groups. So I highly recommend people, if you have an angel group asking for you to do that, it's a bit of a lift the first time, but it's very helpful afterwards.
Mhm.
It allows us to really, we have members across the world, majority are in the US. It allows us to basically, for me, to ping a cardiologist if it's a cardiac deal, or maybe a psychiatrist person if it's mental health and all of that. So it's really helpful for us because we centralize all the information as opposed to me sending email and hope somebody, it goes in the right place.
Right.
And so we typically have a selection committee there. There's a lot of information on the website that shows our deadlines, when you have to submit, when we make the selection, when we invite people to the screening. So we're very transparent. We have a lot of Q&A of what you should address, in your presentation there. So we try to be helpful. We want you to succeed as opposed to us being arrogant and thinking we're smarter than you are, which is the other guys.
Yes.
The guys. Sorry, I couldn't resist. And it's an election year. So we typically get 40 to 50 submissions a month. We only invest in US-based corporations just because
Okay.
tax benefits, for angel investors. And then we pick 4, we invite them to present. It's on Zoom, so it's very easy. We give them 15 minutes uninterrupted. And that's a gift, because if anybody has pitches, you say hello and they interrupt you already. So the idea is that if you cannot tell your story in 15 minutes, then you have a bigger problem. Then we pepper you with questions, then we ask you to leave, then we have an intro discussion. Then we vote, do we want to spend more time in due diligence? That's the only question we ask on a scale of 1 to 10. And these are the notes that we share with the entrepreneur afterwards. Then we invite them, and we ask them for 90 minutes time slots, and we do a doodle internally with maybe a group of 5 people in due diligence, usually an engineer, physicians, and a business person there, depending on the specialty. And then we send them a list of questions that we organize on a Google Docs so they can answer them, so they can organize their thought. They could see how we're thinking. We try to teach them how to do due diligence. And then they send it back to us before the meeting. So that allows us in the meeting to do a deep dive on what's important, as opposed to go down a checklist like, some people. And then we have internal discussions afterwards within the group, and then we decide if we want to invest or not. And when we invest, we go straight in a cap table. So we act as a group to basically review the deal, do the due diligence, talk internally, maybe negotiate with you. But then because we have LPs, we have VCs, we have individual family offices, everybody goes in a cap table. And then we have a side letter where the company agrees to treat us as a group for information rights, board rights, whatever the issues are.
Right. That was really helpful. Thank you for walking us through that kind of process. I wanted to ask, Anne, what are some of the things that you're looking for when it comes to investing kind of in an earlier stage company? Are there specific founder qualities or specific things within the solution that you're kind of keeping an eye out when you're making, the diligence process and ultimately the decision?
Yeah, I mean, so typically there's 5 risks we're looking at. There's the team risk, the market risk, the product risk, the regulatory risk, and the funding risk. And let me go back to each one of them. The first one is there a problem here? I mean, is there a large unmet need that has an acute crisis perception, or you have to create it so that the person who has that problem is aware of it or not? Because sometimes you can do that. And then, so if that's the case, how big is the market, and what will you have to do to convince them that you have the solution? Is it going to take 5,000 patients over 5 years follow-up like in cancer? Or is there something that's a direct to consumer? It's an N of 1, do I like this or not? So I'm just kind of extreme here. So, and then you can basically describe this. Okay, what do you think is the solution of your problems? Not how it works, but what does it do for each of the players? And is their business model here that's scalable? Is the cost of acquisition higher? That's a direct to consumer problem versus a long-term value. Or do you need a new code? That's a kiss of death in healthcare right now. It takes on average 3 to 5 years to get a new code. I mean, that's just like shooting the moon and hoping to hit there. So we try to figure out, is there a big need? If your solution is working, what does it give them? Then look about the technology, how you do it. Okay. And then the next thing is, so that's the product market fit, as I call it. And then the team. I mean, typically in the early stage, there's hole in the management team. That's quite common. But are they aware there is holes? And if they surround themselves with advisors that can basically answer some of those issues, very often it's the commercial side that's very weak.
Right.
Typically, you have the clinicians and the technologists. And so are they aware of it? If we ask questions, if they thought about it, or they're just clueless about it, the market will come to my doorstep. I'm exaggerating. It still happens. And so really understanding what's the dynamics of the team. Do they have a flexible mindset? I mean, I should tell you that I always disagree just to see what happens. If they cut my head off, that's not a good sign. If they just say whatever you want, we'll do you, that's not a good sign either. And
Yeah.
how do they handle people who are challenging them? And
Right.
that's very important there because there is no straight up to the moon journey there. It's a roller coaster of ups and downs. So do they have the resilience to basically, do they have a thick skin?
Right.
And so then we go, if you pass those what's called those big criteria there, then we go into FDA issues. How much funding do you need to have to get to break even? Is this going to be requiring $200 million or $5 million to get the revenues? Can we get angels to get you to validate the market risk?
Right.
Or is this something that needs $50 million to get to the FDA? All of that are very different type of investors and all of that. So that's usually the way we look at companies to basically rank the team risk, the market risk, the product risk, and all of that. And most of them are low to medium to high. It's kind of a very very sophisticated system. We have green, yellow, and red.
I love sometimes though that gets the job done.
Well, if you have too many yellow and red, that's usually kind of the accumulation of the risk. It's too much to handle.
Definitely.
But we may have some members who were in love with the problem.
Yeah.
Because they have some personal reason to be in love with the problem, and they just
Cool.
invest. And then other people are much more risk adverse to say, hey, we don't know if it works yet. We're just going to wait a little bit there. So we may invest a tiny bit at the beginning, some of the members investing. And then as the company progresses, then we invest more and more over time. So, so there are companies we invest a tiny bit at the beginning, and within 2 years, we had put $1 million in. So
That's
it's,
really
so just get into the family, I call it.
Yeah, exactly. So get one way to get your foot in the door. I think sometimes that's enough. I love that. And I would imagine, you're reviewing all of these companies, you're so entrenched in kind of the early stage startup space. On that note, I feel like I'm just picking your brain of all the want to learn all the little details. But are there any common maybe pitfalls or challenges, kind of things that you see startups typically in the early stage kind of do that you would like to kind of let us know as the audience so that we can, learn maybe from those mistakes?
No. Well, there's a lot of movie traps, and some of them, not all of them. I think in women's health in particular, if you look about how do you build big companies, it's the same amount of effort to build $1 million business, a $100 million business. It's painful. And so I just say, think bigger. And so I see a lot of people coming, trying to fix a feature of a product there in an existing market, which is very difficult to do because you have established players. The value proposition isn't worth to basically people to change behavior there. So I see a lot of femtech deals that are too narrow to support putting a whole infrastructure of a company and all of that together there. There's a lot of issues. And then you have the opposite, which is you could say, I'm going to create a brand new category that doesn't exist. No, there's good and bad about that. The good is that you can build a mode, you can build a business model, so you can create your own market that allows you to defend it better, and it could be really build big companies there if you pick a big problem. The problem there is that it's hard to raise initial fundraising because you don't prove that there is a market there. But if you have people like me with Maverick, that's where I've done very well, is to create this new category maker, even if they had no IP, as long as the problem is worth solving and you have a roadmap to explain to people why they have to fix it now with your product. And so I think that's the first problem there. I have an observation for women CEO. I think there's a lot of women CEO on the call there. I have observed, and I'm not the only one who has observed that when we do due diligence, this is really interesting. If you have a man CEO and they have the team there on the due diligence, the man CEO will basically answer 80% of the questions and then maybe send it to the rest of the team for the other 20%. So quick answer, and then they have the VP of engineering and all of that amplifying. A lot of the women CEO just basically pass it on. They try to show collaboration, and they pass it on to all the members. And the problem with that is that we're judging the CEO as a chief of orchestra. And so it's very important that the CEO initially answer the question, even if it's a 30 to 40 second soundbite, to say, this is what we do. Let me have Bob explain more, blah, blah, blah. And so that you show you're in charge. Otherwise, it looks like the founders, which are technically scientific founders, they're really in charge. So women, be aware that collaboration is a nice thing to do, but when you're pitching, you have to show that you're in charge, and then you basically delegate to the right person at the right time there, but you're the one. And another thing that was very interesting, there was a survey that just came out, again, for women pitching, is that they had the same business plan pitched by women CEO versus a man CEO in front of men VCs. And what happened is that the men VC, this is an unconscious bias, we're continuously asking negative questions like, well, what happens if you miss your forecast? What happens if there's a problem with that feature? What happens if this doesn't happen? And then the women automatically get on the defensive to say, no, because we're going to do this and this. But she got into the negative. And those are 1/4 of the funding of the men. On the men's side, the same business plan. They will say, what happens if you grow faster? What happens if, all these positive things, how will you handle that? And as a result of that, their response was on the positive side. When a woman CEO turns a negative into a positive, says, oh, I'm not worried about this problem that you think we have. Let me tell you what my really problem is. We're going to go too fast. And then they got the funding. So just be aware that there is unconscious bias on both sides, as I just explained.
Right.
You don't have to be a man, but you have to just be aware that if you pitch to men, they just have these biases that you need to deal with.
Wow. That's very, very helpful for everyone on the call. I mean, this is just really great, just nuggets of information as it kind of relates to, because I think you bring up a really good point around kind of the unconscious bias or knowing your audience and just really having that awareness, I think is already so important. So thank you, Anne. That was very, very helpful.
Lots of years of suffering.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, you've seen it all, you know it all. So I'm glad that you're kind of sharing your nuggets of wisdom with us. Kind of on that note, would love to also, learn a little bit more from you around, if you are a founder kind of in the early stage space right now, or do you have any tips or tricks of just kind of getting in front of VCs in the first place? I know sometimes that can also be a little bit of a gap. Cold calling effective? Are there any specific networking or industry events? What is kind of the right strategy to find investors to even pitch in front of?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some statistics from the National Venture Association that shows that cold calling has a 0% investment rate. So don't even bother, or at least it's a very low number.
Yeah.
So what I would do is that, try to get angels who have a reputations to basically put a check. And it's not how much they put in there. It's the fact that they now are basically invest in helping you. They all have a network. And the best, what you need is an introduction of somebody the VC trust to open that door. The other one that's a very great tip is for all the ladies on the line here, or the men, is go on LinkedIn and find out who are the portfolio of that VC. Do your homework like he's your first customer. Because you are selling. Your job as a CEO is half the time is to be selling. You first have to basically build some type of prototype. Then you have to sell investors to invest in you, and then sell more to higher levels. Right. So do your homework. Go on the website of the VC. Find out the guy that has the right background for you. Find out his portfolio company. Find out who is the CEO of this portfolio company. Contact them on LinkedIn, and just to say, hey, I have something in the same space, not competitive to you. Do you mind if we have a quick call? I'd love an introduction to so-and-so. Most entrepreneurs have raised money too, and they know how painful that is. And they very often, if they like you, if you do a good job doing your spiel, they will open the door. If I have one of my CEO of company sending me an email to say, hey, I want you to look at this deal, I always look at that deal. Yeah. It's an easy way to get in there because it's a trusted source. And so, as I said, it's a very effective method there. So your angel investors, ask them to open the right door. Have a discussion with them on who is the right VCs. We all know who to work for and not to work with. Yeah. And as I said, find a portfolio company. And when you talk to the CEOs of the portfolio company, you need to ask questions like, well, what's the style of this person on the board? Is he a micromanager, which he won't tell you there, but what type of question does he ask? How often does he call you? How active is he? And read between the lines. Is he a micromanager, which you may not want? Is he an absent guy? Is he opening door? Is he just criticizing all the time? What's the dynamics of the board? They won't tell you anything negative. It's what they don't tell you that you need. Yeah, that's right. So spend some time on the portfolio CEOs.
That's smart. That is such great advice. And the chat also very much agrees with you. And that is really, really astute advice. So thank you for sharing that with us. I also wanted to ask maybe a little bit more broadly, you've shed so much insight into kind of the day-to-day, the work that's kind of being done, raising all of that fun stuff. But I'm also so curious because you have really been, you're at the seat of innovation right now with all of the companies that you're seeing. What are some key trends or innovation? What are things that you're excited about? Are there any particular disease states that you feel like there's a lot of innovation in the space, or anything in particular that's really interesting you right now?
Well, I think what's interesting is that people are finally realizing that men and women are different in how we respond to disease, which I would have told you that 50 years ago, but anyway. And so as a result of that, there is the White House initiative with Jill Biden that's really basically trying to put some spotlight on that. Pharma like Merck are doing an effort. I think that's one of your sponsors there in investing more. I mean, historically, I think it was only 2% of pharma was spent on women's specific type of diseases there. So I think we finally are realizing there's a whole market that's been ignored. So that's positive because we need the whole ecosystem to change.
Mhm.
I hate to use the word AI because there's no longer software now, there's only AI. So I think Rock Health just announced that 38% of the deals this year, were all AI based.
Mhm.
I think I'm a little bit more nervous on that one. I think for me, AI is like the internet 20 years ago. It's a tool to allow you to do things you could not do before. So as
Right.
long as you use it in that context, it's a useful tool. But at the end of the day, it's a problem you're solving that creates a benefit that somebody's willing to pay for. I mean, they don't pay for AI; they buy for an AI-enabled technology. And then there's the
Right.
issues like, what is the AI role? Is this something that's helping somebody be more efficient, which is healthcare as a software as a services type of a deal? Or
Mhm.
is this something to replace humans, like the agents and all of these other things? And
Got it.
and I personally believe that the easiest first adoption is going to be the back end administrative stuff, the supply
Mhm.
chains, the scheduling, all those things like that. The last thing that's going to happen is the front end, which is the contact with the patients,
Right.
because there's a lot of reason there where I'm not sure AI is there yet. That's just my experience so far. Um,
Sure.
and I think the other thing I'd like to say is that women health is not fertility. Uh,
Mhm.
Women's health is very much bigger than that. Fertility may be 10% of women's health, and I'm being generous with 10%. There's all the
Yeah.
issue of menopause. We invest in a company called Joylux, and Joylux just announced a deal with Haley Berry.
Oh,
That
wow.
menopause is a big deal. And
Yeah.
I think as we start to have this celebrity who go out there to say, no, we're not a second-rate woman when we pass menopause. We're full women there. We just have slightly different needs. And
Yeah.
technology to help us there, it destigmatized women's health, which I think is a big issue there. So I think you started to see, Oprah, Halle Berry, or people or influencers were forcing men to deal with the fact, my gosh, I can make money here, which
Yeah.
at the end of the day is what matters for
Right.
those guys. So I'm very optimistic. The only thing I'm worried is that a lot of the company being started are narrow ones, so they become 5, 10, $15 million in sales. They're not a big exit. And
Right.
the reason why the big men VCs only invest in 2% of women CEOs is because they cannot get these huge multi-billion dollars exit. Uh,
Mm.
and so I think we need to think bigger, ladies. If you're gonna spend 5 years of your life killing yourself, do it for the hundreds of millions.
That's
Think
right.
big.
I love that. And I think I just realized too, and that we are at time. And I feel like that is such a beautiful way to end our conversation is really with that
Go
rallying
girls.
cry.
Go vote. Go vote.
Both, exactly. That's right. Make sure you go vote and make sure that you think big. I love both of those words of wisdom. Thank you so much, Anne, for sharing your wisdom with us. Such a delight to learn from you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Anne. Wanted to also make sure that you join us next time for our next Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. Wanted to give a quick shout out to our sponsors for sponsoring this conversation, as well as one last huge shout out to Anne. We'll definitely need to have you for a part 2 at some point so that you can keep sharing your insights with us. And we'll see you all next Wednesday. Bye, everyone.
Bye.